Imagine dedicating your life to a cause, facing relentless persecution, preaching to the ends of the known world, and, in the end, meeting a brutal fate. This was the reality of the apostles of Jesus Christ, the 12 men who spread the message of the gospel and paid a high price for their faith. Few know what really happened to each of them, and their deaths are as shocking as their lives. Get ready for a journey through the history of early Christianity, where courage and martyrdom went hand in hand. Join us as we reveal how each of the apostles met their end, often in a violent and cruel manner. Their trajectories are full of mysteries, impressive stories, and acts of extreme faith. Peter, crucified, upside down Peter, considered the leader of the apostles, was one of the most influential figures in the spread of early Christianity. He evangelized throughout the Roman Empire and became one of the main figures in the early Christian church. During the reign of Emperor Nero, he was arrested in Rome and sentenced to crucifixion. Peter had already survived several persecutions and escaped death several times, but this time his fate was sealed. According to Christian tradition, when he learned that he would be crucified, Peter made an unusual request. He wanted to be killed upside down, as he did not consider himself worthy of dying in the same way as his master, Jesus Christ. The process of crucifixion was one of the most brutal and agonizing forms of execution at the time. The condemned man was nailed or tied to a cross and left to die slowly from asphyxiation and exhaustion. In Peter's case, the suffering was even worse. His wrists and ankles were nailed to the wood and he was suspended upside down, increasing the pain and difficulty in breathing. Blood pooled in his head, making his death even more torturous and prolonged. Reports indicate that Peter remained alive for several hours, perhaps even days, enduring unimaginable pain while continuing to proclaim his faith. His martyrdom is believed to have occurred around the year 64 AD, possibly near the Circus of Nero, the site of today's St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. During this time, many Christians were persecuted and brutally killed under the rule of Nero, who used followers of Christ as scapegoats for the empire's problems. Peter's body was secretly removed by his followers and buried in a place that would later become one of the holiest places in Christianity. According to tradition, his remains rest beneath St. Peter's Basilica in the heart of the Vatican, where thousands of pilgrims pay their respects to this day. James, son of Zebedee, beheaded. With a sword, James, one of the sons of Zebedee and brother of John, was one of the first apostles to die for his faith. He was part of Jesus' inner circle and witnessed events such as the Transfiguration. James was noted for his fervent preaching and for the active role he played in the spread of Christianity. However, his growing influence troubled the Jewish and Roman authorities. Around AD 44, during the reign of Herod Agrippa I, he was arrested and sentenced to death. James's execution was brutal. He was sentenced to be beheaded by sword, a swift but still terrifying method of execution. Historical accounts indicate that as he was being led to his execution site, one of his accusers was so impressed by his courage and faith that he decided to convert to Christianity at that moment. Moved by his newfound faith, the accuser publicly declared his faith in Christ and, as a result, was sentenced to death alongside James. They were both beheaded together. James's death marks the first recorded execution of an apostle in the Bible. Unlike others who faced prolonged torture and even more cruel methods of execution, James died a relatively quick death. However, his beheading was a significant blow to the early church and signaled the increasing persecution that followers of Christ would face in the years to come. Christians of that time deeply mourned the loss of James, but his death also served as a powerful testimony to the Christian faith. His legacy endures to this day, and his memory is honored as one of the earliest martyrs of Christianity. 3. John, the only one who died of old age. John, the brother of James, was one of the main leaders of the early Christian church. Unlike the other apostles, John did not die a violent death. According to tradition, John was one of Jesus' closest disciples, being called the beloved disciple. He was present at crucial moments in Christ's life, including the Last Supper and the crucifixion. After Jesus' death and resurrection, John dedicated his life to preaching the gospel and caring for Christian communities. During the reign of Emperor Domitian, John was captured and taken to Rome, where he faced terrible torture. According to tradition, he was thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil, but miraculously survived without suffering any harm. This event is said to have caused great shock and caused John to be exiled to the island of Patmos, where he wrote the book of Revelation. After years in exile, John was released and returned to Ephesus, where he continued his ministry into old age. Unlike the other apostles, he was not martyred. However, he lived under constant persecution and oppression. He is said to have died around the year 100 AD, the only one of the 12 apostles to die of natural causes. Even though he did not die a violent death, John suffered intense persecution throughout his life. His testimony and resilience made him a symbol of perseverance and faith. His tomb, located in Ephesus, is revered to this day. 4. Andrew, crucified on an X-shaped cross. Andrew, Peter's brother, was an early follower of Jesus and played a pivotal role in the evangelization of several regions, including Greece and Asia Minor. He is remembered for his humility and dedication to the gospel. While preaching in the city of Patras, in present-day Greece, Andrew aroused the wrath of the Roman Governor Aegeus by converting his wife to Christianity. Furious, Aegeus ordered Andrew to renounce his faith, but he refused. As punishment, he was sentenced to be crucified. The cross used for his execution was in the shape of an X, unlike the traditional Latin cross. He was tied rather than nailed, prolonging his suffering even further. For 2 full days, Andrew remained suspended in excruciating pain, while he continued to preach and encourage the faithful who gathered around him. He begged God for strength and courage, refusing any attempt to spare him from execution. His final moments were marked by fervent prayer and the unshakable conviction that his suffering was an honor for following in the footsteps of Christ. 5. Philip, hanged and crucified at Hierapolis. Philip was an early follower of Jesus and played a key role in preaching the gospel, especially in Asia Minor and Greece. He performed miracles and converted many to Christianity, which aroused the ire of the Roman authorities. Philip preached throughout many regions, including Phrygia, where he had great success converting pagans to Christianity. However, this religious expansion deeply disturbed the local leaders, who saw him as a threat to their traditional culture and religion. This led to his imprisonment in the city of Hierapolis, where he was brutally tortured. Philip's death was particularly cruel. He was mercilessly flogged, leaving his body covered in wounds and blood. He was then sentenced to be hanged upside down, a position that intensified his suffering. To prolong his agony even further, he was later crucified. Witnesses claim that even in these final moments, he did not stop preaching, urging the spectators to follow Christ. The account of his execution states that while Philip was dying, an earthquake struck Hierapolis, destroying part of the city and terrifying the population. This event led many inhabitants to convert to Christianity, interpreting it as a divine sign. His body was removed from the cross and buried by his followers, becoming a revered martyr. His tomb was discovered in Hierapolis, in modern-day Turkey, and is a site of Christian pilgrimage to this day. Philip's story continues to inspire believers around the world, demonstrating the unwavering power of faith even in the face of the most horrific of deaths. Bartholomew, Nathanael, skinned alive and decapitated, Bartholomew, also known as Nathanael, was one of the 12 apostles and one of the first to recognize Jesus as the Son of God. He traveled to many regions preaching the gospel, including India, Ethiopia, and Armenia. Bartholomew's death was one of the most brutal among the apostles. After being captured in Armenia by pagan priests enraged by his preaching, he was subjected to a horrific martyrdom. He was flayed alive, his skin torn off while he was still conscious. This method of execution was used to cause unimaginable pain, exposing muscles and nerves to the open air, intensifying the suffering. Tradition has it that, even in the face of such torture, Bartholomew continued to pray and proclaim his faith until the very end. After being completely flayed, he remained alive for some time before being finally decapitated to ensure his death. According to historical records, those responsible for his execution were priests and religious authorities who saw his message as a direct threat to their faith and the power they exercised over the population. For them, the conversion of many to Christianity, driven by Bartholomew's miracles and teachings, was unacceptable. His remains were taken by his followers and buried in an unknown location. Later, his bones were transferred to the Church of St. Bartholomew in Rome, where they are venerated to this day as sacred relics. Bartholomew's martyrdom became a symbol of the extreme sacrifice made by the apostles to spread the message of Jesus. His story echoes through the centuries, inspiring believers to remain steadfast in their faith, no matter what hardships and persecutions they may face. Matthew, Levi, killed by sword or spears. Matthew, also known as Levi, was a tax collector before following Jesus. He is traditionally considered the author of the Gospel of Matthew and played a key role in the spread of Christianity. Matthew traveled extensively to preach, taking the message of Christ to places such as Ethiopia and Persia. His preaching, however, aroused the fury of local leaders. There are reports that he was brutally murdered on the orders of an Ethiopian king, who did not accept his influence over the population. Matthew's death was cruel. Some accounts claim he was stabbed to death with swords or spears, while others suggest he may have been burned alive. In both cases, he faced an agonizing death, demonstrating his unwavering faith until his last breath. Matthew is remembered for his courage and the lasting impact of his gospel, which continues to inspire millions of believers around the world. 8. Thomas Didymus, pierced with spears in India. Thomas, known as Didymus meaning twin, is remembered for his initial disbelief upon hearing about Jesus' resurrection. However, his faith grew to the point that he became one of the most dedicated and fearless apostles in preaching the gospel. Thomas took the Christian message to distant regions, reaching as far as India, where he established several Christian communities that exist to this day. However, his preaching provoked the ire of local religious leaders and Hindu rulers, who saw conversion to Christianity as a threat to their power. According to tradition, Thomas was attacked by a group of soldiers while praying in a cave or temple in the city of Mylapore, India. He was brutally pierced with spears, suffering an agonizing death. Some versions of the story indicate that he was struck repeatedly and left to die slowly, without help. Despite the brutality of his death, His mission in India was so impactful that to this day there are Christian communities that identify themselves as spiritual descendants of Thomas. His remains were transferred to Edessa, present-day Turkey, and his memory lives on as a symbol of unwavering faith in the face of persecution. James, son of Alphaeus, James the Less, stoned and beaten to death. James, son of Alphaeus, also called James the Less, was one of the most discreet apostles in the Gospels, but he played a fundamental role in the early church. He is said to have been the leader of the church in Jerusalem and a tireless defender of the Christian faith. According to tradition, James was condemned by the Sanhedrin and taken to the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem, where he was forced to renounce his faith. When he refused, he was thrown from the top of the temple. Surviving the fall, he was surrounded by a crowd and brutally stoned. Since he was still alive, one of those present beat him with a club until he died. His martyrdom demonstrates the hatred and persecution that early Christians faced. His legacy lives on in the faith of those who follow his teachings. 2. Judas Thaddeus Lebbaeus. Beaten to death, Judas Thaddeus, also called Lebbaeus, was one of the most faithful apostles and is often confused with Judas Iscariot. He traveled throughout various regions preaching the gospel, including Mesopotamia, Syria, and Persia. In Persia, he and Simon the Zealot faced intense persecution for converting large numbers of people to Christianity. This aroused the fury of the local pagan priests who decided to put an end to their preaching. Judas Thaddeus was captured and subjected to an extremely brutal death. He was beaten violently with clubs and maces until his body could no longer withstand the injuries. According to tradition, his tormentors continued to beat him even after he lost consciousness, ensuring that there was no chance of survival. His martyrdom was one of the most cruel and demonstrates the brutality faced by the early Christians. His memory remains alive, especially in popular devotion, where he is known as the Saint of Impossible Causes. 11. Simon the Zealot, Sawed in half Simon. The Zealot was one of the most enigmatic apostles. Known for his fervent zeal, he preached the gospel in many regions, including Persia, where he met his tragic fate. According to tradition, Simon was captured by pagan priests who were furious about his preaching. He was sentenced to one of the most horrific executions of the time. He was sawed in half. This cruel practice consisted of tying the victim up and using a saw to slowly cut him apart, starting from the feet and working his way up to the head. It was an agonizing and extremely painful death. Even in the face of this torture, Simon remained steadfast in his faith, refusing to deny Christ. His martyrdom is remembered as an unshakable testimony to the Christian faith, and his courage has inspired generations of believers down the centuries. Judas Iscariot, the traitor apostle, and his tragic end. Judas Iscariot is one of the most controversial figures in the Bible. He was the apostle who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, handing him over to the religious leaders who wanted him dead. Despite following Jesus and witnessing his miracles, his greed and disillusionment led him to commit one of the most infamous acts in history. After betraying Jesus, Judas was overcome with deep remorse. Unlike the other apostles who died as martyrs, Judas met a tragic end at his own hands. According to the Gospel of Matthew, he tried to return the money he had received to betray Jesus, but the religious leaders refused to take it back. Desperate and consumed with guilt, Judas went out and hanged himself. Another account found in the book of Acts describes his death in an even more shocking manner. It is said that after falling from a cliff, his body split in half, spilling his entrails across the ground. This gruesome detail suggests that his death may have been even more violent and disturbing than the traditional account of hanging. Judas's fate serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the burden of conscience. While the other apostles faced death with courage and faith, Judas died in despair, finding no redemption. His story remains one of the most powerful episodes in the New Testament, and one of the most studied and debated throughout the history of Christianity. The price of discipleship, the legacy of the apostles. The tragic deaths of the apostles are a testament to the price paid for their faith in Christ. Each of them faced unspeakable persecution and suffering, yet remained steadfast in their mission to spread the gospel. Their stories are not only tales of pain and sacrifice, but also of courage, devotion, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. The martyrdom of the apostles was not in vain. Their shed blood strengthened the foundations of the church and inspired countless generations of Christians to remain faithful despite adversity. Today, their legacy lives on, reminding us that true faith often requires sacrifice, but it also offers a hope that transcends death itself. May their stories challenge us to live with the same determination and passion, and may their example motivate us to remain steadfast in our faith no matter the cost.